That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about The Things You Kill, the third film directed by Alireza Khatami, which premieres January 24th at the 2025 Sundance Film Festival in the World Cinema Dramatic Competition.
Do you know this director's other films?
I have not, but they're both very well regarded, and I'm very curious to watch them now. Oblivion Verses and Terrestrial Verses from 2017 and 2023, premiering in Venice and Cannes, respectively.
What is this film about? Haunted by the suspicious death of his ailing mother, a university professor coerces his enigmatic gardener to execute a cold-blooded act of vengeance. What's your pull quote?
Khatami boldly explores a compelling psychological portrait of vengeance and how our own internalized compartmentalizing and interpretation fosters one's own self-destruction.
Mine. Khatami expertly crafts a Lynchian-like thriller that explores the danger of following our inner saboteur.
It's very layered. There's a lot of metaphorical subtext going on that I find really interesting. Even some biblical allusions. It's kind of a reversal of the Isaac Abraham narrative.
What did I like? The cinematography, the performances from everyone, the story. This was very effective.
Yeah, it's compelling.
And there's a bit of we go through a wormhole, like at the end of I would say like the first act.
I think the visual representation of what's going on psychologically with the main character is very interesting.
The story is that there is this guy named Ali.
Played by Ekin Koç.
And he is a university professor, like an adjunct professor who's working part-time. He teaches like US translations relating to literature. It's not a popular course. He's married. And both of his parents are alive. His mother is ailing. So a lot is happening. He finds out that his course will not be offered the following semester. So basically he's out of a job. He and his wife are having fertility issues, and he has just learned that he's the problem. He's the one with the low sperm count. He also finds out that his mother has died.
Suddenly.
And we had already seen him interact with his mother and father. He's very loving towards his mother. She's loving towards him. But the father is not a nice man to anyone.
Hammett.
So Ali starts to believe that maybe his father is responsible for his mother's death. And the clues that we get are that the mother supposedly fell face down. But the death certificate says otherwise. It says that she died from blunt force trauma to the back of her head. Then Ali finds out from his sister that the dad was having an affair. The sister also...
And has plans to move this other woman into the house.
And that the dad had physically abused the mother previously. So much so that she suffered a concussion and maybe even had brain damage.
And was held hostage in her house, so her daughters couldn't take her to the hospital. It's notable that Ali was away for 14 years in the U.S. Studying comparative literature.
So, Ali and his wife live in the city, but Ali has a garden like an hour outside of the city in this rural area. So we see him at his garden just sort of thinking and working, and we'll get to all the symbolism, but it seems like he's having issues in the garden, like things aren't growing, the well is having issues. And all of a sudden, one day, this gardener shows up, which feels very random.
Named Reza, played by Erkan, Kolçak, Köstendil.
And Ali and Reza become very close, like just inexplicably, Ali is sharing with Reza all the issues that he thinks revolve around his mother's suspicious death. And one day, while Ali is chilling in the garden, Reza pulls up in his Volvo talking about get in and bring the shovel. And we find out that Reza has Ali's dad tied up in the back of the car, and they're going to a site to kill and bury the father. And they do. And this happens like at the 40-minute mark of this 2-hour film. So what happens after is a cascade of events, but the gag is, after the father is killed, all of a sudden the actors portraying Ali and Reza switch. So now Ali is tied up in the garden like a dog, while the actor who had played Reza is now Ali. Meaning that when all of Ali's family and co-workers meet him, they think it's Ali. So they all see who they think is Ali. So as the audience, we see a different actor.
And we come to realize that the gardener was never real. He's merely a facet of Ali's personality.
So of course, there's some tension because the investigation is sort of maybe, it's never super close, but they do sort of suspect there's something weird with Ali.
Yes, notably the night his dad disappeared, he showed up at 4 a.m., which happens to be the night his wife leaves him. One of the sisters knows about that, tells that to the police.
But the heat is taken off of him when the father's vehicle that was also missing shows up submerged in a body of water. So the authorities chalk it up to, oh, he must have gotten into an accident and we can't find the body because the water, took it away. So all's well that ends well. Ali, after the heat is off of him and the police determine it was an accident, now we see the actors switch again. So we see that original actor playing Ali back as Ali. We also see that he is able to afford to proceed with fertility treatments with his wife. The end.
Kind of, but it ends on a moment where it suggests that he's probably forever going to be haunted by this experience, with a knocking at the door, which was giving me Edgar Allan Poe's Telltale Heart.
Yes, we can explain that better. But yeah, I was very impressed with this story. And it's interesting that I watched this right after I watched Mulholland Drive for the first time. Because there are some parallels.
With your Lynchian reference to entangled personalities and who is who and who's thinking or dreaming what.
Well, in the multiple layers.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
I'm going to start off with my notes. It's interesting that the film is dedicated to the director's sister.
And that his name is Alireza.
Which he split to name the two characters. So I would love to know, I probably should have listened to him talk about the film.
Well, I was perusing the press notes that arrived with the Sundance information I received, and I think part of it is sifting through autobiographical details, which suggest that. Notably, he's Iranian American, and he was not able to film this in Iran because of the patricide issues, which is why something like Seat of the Sacred Fig was so contentious last year. But so that's why it was relocated to Turkey, but an area where he still could examine these same kind of issues in a similar rigid heteropatriarchal culture, because I think in essence this is about a man who is dealing with a rejection of that culture and kind of an emasculation of it. And I think we can get further into that, but an emasculation due to that, which is why his garden's not growing and he, can't procreate.
Yeah. Well, and then speaking of that, there's this symbolism of the well, because we're told that the water in this area is very strictly regulated, but there's also a lot of corruption surrounding it, meaning that government officials can be bribed to allow people to dig in ways that they wouldn't normally be allowed. And
also with fertility issues, like surrogacy isn't legal, but again, you can bribe the officials if need be to get your blockage removed, whatever that blockage may be.
Yeah, we also see that when Ali switches to the actor who had played Reza, we see him engage in or attempt to engage in an inappropriate sexual relationship with one of his students that gets thwarted because the dead dad's side piece shows up at Ali's house asking if he's seen his dad. I thought that scene was very good because he's mad.
I think what's interesting about the casting choices of the two men ostensibly playing the same person is that Ekin Koç is almost the aspirational, albeit maybe more Americanized version of this man. And he's starting to act out more aggressively when Reza takes over that part of, like, it's almost like the id has taken over a little bit in response to the trauma of murdering his father.
Well, I chalk that up to him having spent 14 years in the US. And even his father says that. that he's changed.
Well, yeah, he's removed. There's also a component I think that's key. We get two snippets of his lectures, of Ali's lectures, and talking about translation and things that are lost in translation, or maybe if they're recuperated and returned to, have kind of more of a devious meaning. And one of them is the actual word for interpretation, and also an Arabic root which means to stone, ostensibly to kill. So in translating something between languages, between these cultural language barriers, you're literally having to undo it, to kill it. And I think that is meant to relate what Ali, to get back to a translation of himself, is literally having to kill the origin, which is the father.
Well, speaking of the father, I think the script does a really good job of outlining who this man, the father, was in very short order. Because when Ali, in the beginning of the film, goes to visit his mother just to check on her, and she asks him, oh, can you check the toilet? It's not flushing. And he says, oh, the pipes need help. And then she needs to be clean, like bathed. And so he says, well, let me do it. And she's embarrassed, but he does. And he's very tender and loving towards her. But then the dad shows up with the cousin. And the dad is rude. He doesn't want Ali to pay for any plumbing. And when Ali gets the call that his mom died, it's in the middle of the night. So he rushes over. And when he gets there,
also interrupting, though, an act of procreation.
That's right. He and his wife are having sex when the phone rings. But when he gets to his parents' house, the mom's body has already been taken away by the medical examiner.
Many hours have passed, and every other relative is there. And
of course, Ali's mad. Like, you couldn't wait the extra hour for me to show up. And the dad's being rude, and they have a kind of an aggressive exchange. But I thought in those two scenes, we really understand their relationship, father and son. I do have to say, when we see the mom's grave, it looked like something from the Little Rascals.
Well, I guess the headstone hadn't arrived yet, but there's a key information there with his younger sister, who relates a story about how she witnessed the mom get punched in the head by dad.
Well, let's talk about that, because there are two sisters, a younger and an older. And the younger sister seems to be closer to Ali, and she relays a story of how dad punched mom and she was in really bad shape, and then he locked her in the house for days, and they had to stand outside the window like Mervyn's. And then the older sister,
but she says mom didn't want you to know.
Right. Which was heartbreaking.
Being protected. And she has a really good line about how agony seems reserved solely for women. Like these men get to skirt around being having a grand old happy day, but we have to know what's really going on.
So then the older sister and Ali go to talk to detectives, and that exchange was kind of tense, because we can see that Ali's trying to be vague with the information he's giving the detective, and the older sister's looking at him like, something's not right. So then as they're leaving the police station, the sister tells Ali, oh, I knew, what's her name, Pervin or?
Miriam,
the side piece.
Oh no, Parvu, something like that, yeah.
And of course, that's a shock to Ali. Like, you knew that dad was cheating on mom?
Who seems like a really sweet lady herself.
Well, I thought that was so interesting, because it's, at first glance, you think like, wow, this is crazy. But then I feel like a lot of people can relate to, and the older sister says something that was, I thought kind of heartbreaking. She goes, well, thanks to this lady, dad was nicer to mom. Like, she kind of took the edge off, which unfortunately is probably very real. Because what would that mom have done had the dad left her? So because the dad was satisfied in other ways, he stuck around maybe longer. But although ultimately, and it's never fully confirmed.
It isn't, but the way he's acting when the mom is still alive, he seems tired of dealing with her in any capacity.
Well, in the scene when they kill the dad, he's like,
get over it, stop crying. Like, she's...
Yeah, I mean, he didn't give me the impression that he didn't do it.
But after the murder of the father, that's when Ali becomes, the actor switches, but that's when he becomes very aggressive with both sisters. Miriam wants to get out of the car at how he's raising his voice at her. He becomes more like his father.
Another interesting symbol is when we first meet Ali in his garden, he has a dog, this big German Shepherd that's kind of aggressive. Not to Ali, but to other people.
And he describes it as having a resentful nature.
Yes. After Ali and Reza switch bodies, the dog is no longer in sight. In fact, the actor who was originally playing Ali is tied up in the dog, like in the doghouse, like literally chained up. But then after it's realized that the death of the dad is chalked up as an accident, that's when they switch back. But how they switch back is the chained up Ali kills Reza. And then towards the end of the film, we see, is it the wife? Because the wife, I think, is a veterinarian, Ali's wife. She shows up to the garden now that they're back on good terms with a puppy named after
The other dog.
the dog we saw originally. I thought that was really interesting.
And I think him killing that version of himself also alludes to that. We get a repetition of that moment about interpretation, and part of translating involves killing.
Yes.
Figuratively.
We get a scene at like the Department of Water where Ali as Reza shows up and he tries to bribe the official and it's successful, which again, like you mentioned, now that Ali's in this new body, he's more assertive, less scared. Because originally when the gardener had proposed, like, yes, you're not supposed to do this, but people do it. You just have to be bold enough to ask. Ali at that point is like, oh, that just doesn't sound like something I could do. When the older sister tells Ali about what the dad did, and then she says, well, he asked for forgiveness. Ali goes, he asked for forgiveness from a semi-paralyzed woman with nowhere to go. And then that was kind of heartbreaking, because when you meet the mother, she seems much older than the dad, and she's in very bad shape. She uses a walker.
Well, it's probably when you get beaten for decades.
True.
That's what happens to
but
your body.
I mean, she looked like the grandma.
Yeah.
Because when we meet the dad, I thought that was Ali's older brother. And we see a missing poster of him, which I laughed because I thought it looked like that gay comedian Brad Locally. But
oh my God.
Yeah, the dad looks much more vibrant than the mother, which is also sad.
Well, and it seems like his plan was maybe to drive her to an early death that he could no longer wait to transpire on its own.
What did you make of the scene? So now that when Ali goes to talk to the university, like the dean of the school, to ask about his job, and then the dean says, yeah,
there's not enough enrollment.
There's not enough enrollment, and like, stupid you, like, why would you go to the US to learn English to then do translations for literature? Like, no one in Turkey wants that. You could have been so much more successful helping people translate like physics or engineering. So he's sort of like telling him that you wasted your time. And then all of a sudden, Ali starts telling the story about how he felt about his dad. What did you make of that?
Well, that everything was about running from himself. I thought that was, the whole point of distancing himself. And because of that, he couldn't, you can't go home again. And he did. And he wasn't able to succeed having gone back in that manner. So it's almost like he had to literally kill what was choking him, is how I was kind of taking that. And also in that scene, we're back to the original actor that we met playing this character. And he's also kind of fighting for a place for the ability to keep that class going despite low enrollment, which I think we're supposed to read as something he wouldn't have done previously.
Oh, sure. So we get a scene towards the end where Ali is helping empty out his parents' house. But then, as you already mentioned, the end of the film is actually what I interpreted as a dream of Ali in his parents' empty house, when all of a sudden the dead dad knocks on the door and he looks bloodied. And so, as you said, representing probably the grief he's going to live with for the rest of his life, knowing that he is responsible for killing his dad.
And comes down and lies on the floor and says, "Kill the light," which also to using language is used to, how we you communicate and shine a light on things, like put me back in the dark. That's almost saying, because then beyond that we get another knock at the door, meaning that the consequences of what Ali has done means that he's never going to. There's a part of him that will always be held back in that moment.
He'll never be at peace. I was very impressed with this film. I hope it gets a lot of attention.
I think we need to shout, because you mentioned the cinematography, Bartosz Swiniarski, who's also lensed Apples by Christos Nikou. Yeah, I think it's a very handsome looking film. Ekin Koç has been in several things I've seen, including My Brother's Keeper, and a really interesting film by Emin Alper called Burning Days, which has a Turkish film with a gay component, which I remember seeing at Cannes, which is pretty interesting. And then his wife, played by Hazar Ergüçlü, sorry, butchering these Turkish names, but she's worked with, Turkey's premier filmmaker Nuri Bilge Ceylan with The Wild Pear Tree, which is almost all of that man's films are excellent, but that is one that I believe was kind of unrecognized at the time. But
what would you give
The Things You Kill? Give it a 4.
Yeah, I think it's excellent. I would give it 4 out of 5. Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.